I used to think I was the backbone of the family, a mother, a grandmother, the woman silently holding it all together. But one late night, I found out my daughter had taken out loans in my name, bought a car for her husband, and signed for my grandchild's tuition without asking me. When I confronted her, she just said coldly, "You've always done everything. I'm just continuing the pattern. No apology, no tears." That's when I realized I was never a mother to them, just a shadow. If you think this is just another family drama, you're dead wrong. Hit subscribe now so you won't miss the haunting stories we bring to light. It always started with the kettle. A soft whistle at 5:30 a.m. just as the early Colorado fog clung to the window panes. Evelyn Moore, 70 years old, stood alone in the pale light of the kitchen, wrapping her arthritic fingers around the chipped ceramic mug she had used for decades. She didn't sigh. Sighing suggested disappointment, and she'd long since taught herself that disappointment only comes to those who still hope. The house was quiet. Vanessa never woke before 7, but Evelyn had already unpacked the groceries, folded the laundry, and made the school lunches. This was her rhythm now. Invisible labor, day after day. She used to teach English literature to high schoolers, used to quote Austen and Baldwin, and make teenagers care about stories. Now her days were silent, except for the kettle. By 6:45, she was flipping pancakes, humming without realizing it, while the scent of butter filled the kitchen. It was the only moment of control she still had breakfast. Eggs not too runny, toast cut diagonally. She placed everything on the table as Vanessa's children, Lily, 12, and Jordan, 8, stumbled in, heads still fogged by sleep eyes on their phones. They didn't say thank you. They never did. Evelyn didn't expect them to anymore. At 7:15, Vanessa appeared wearing yoga pants and a crisp white blouse. Her hair was perfect. Her tone was not. "Mom, could you please drive Lily to soccer later? I have a team Zoom and I'll probably run late." "Of course," Evelyn replied, drying her hands on a faded dish towel. Vanessa didn't look up. She was already tapping on her phone, walking away. By noon, Evelyn had cleaned the kitchen twice and ironed Vanessa's new summer dresses Evelyn herself had paid for under the excuse of helping out. Retirement savings weren't meant for silk blouses, but Vanessa always had a way of making guilt sound like gratitude. "You're so good at this, Mom. I just don't have your gift." At 2:30, Evelyn waited by the school gate. Her back ached from standing too long. Other grandmothers chatted with each other. Evelyn stood slightly apart as she always did. She waved to Lily and Jordan, who approached with earbuds in and mild annoyance that the car wasn't closer. Later that afternoon, as Evelyn was washing Jordan's muddy socks in the sink, she heard Vanessa laughing in the living room, a soft, controlled giggle, the kind she used with clients and people she needed something from. Evelyn wiped her hands, curious. "I know, right? Finally, Lisbon, Paris, then Milan. I booked the boutique hotel you sent me. No kids screaming, no chaos. Just us girls and wine," Vanessa said into her phone. There was a pause. "Yeah, Mom, she's still here. But no, she's not coming. God, no. I mean, she'd slow everything down. Can you imagine? We'd have to worry about her knees and allergies and God knows what else." Evelyn had stopped in the hallway. She didn't say a word, just stood there letting the words seep in, letting the truth peel her open slowly. She stepped back into the kitchen before her presence could be noticed. Her heart didn't race. It simply dimmed, like a light bulb that flickered not from drama, but from exhaustion. That night, after the children had gone to bed, after Vanessa retreated to her room with a glass of wine and a magazine she wouldn't finish, Evelyn sat at the long dining table alone. She stared at her iPad. Well, technically it was Jordan's school tablet, but Evelyn used it when no one was looking. She was trying to look up a book, something familiar. But instead, she saw it. A browser tab left open. Trip Planner Europe, Summer Itinerary, Final Draft. Evelyn opened it. First stop Lisbon, 3 days in the Bairro Alto district, next a 2-day food tour in Paris. Then Milan, spa day booked, high-speed rail, luggage restrictions noted, group name More Girls, summer reboot. 12 travelers. Evelyn's name wasn't one of them. She scrolled down. Vanessa? Vanessa's best friend? The friend's sister? A cousin from LA, even Lily and Jordan. Evelyn paused at that. So the children were going. They were going too. The entire house she cleaned, fed, cared for. They were all going, except her. And then the email popped up in the corner of the screen. It was from an airline. Subject confirmation, booking ref number 8721. Her breath caught. The email listed the flight numbers, the seats, even the hotel transfers. It was all arranged, already paid for, already final. She clicked again. There was a note under special instructions. Please ensure that we have early check-in. One of the travelers has dietary restrictions and one has mild motion sickness. Also, this trip is a celebration. We've all had a rough year and we're leaving our stress behind. We don't want any obligations or dependencies, just fun, laughter, and freedom. Evelyn sat back. Obligations, dependencies? Was that what she was now? The kettle in the kitchen hissed again, automatic timer. It was always set to this hour when she liked a warm cup of chamomile to close her long invisible days. But tonight she didn't move. She looked at her hands, dry and worn, the same hands that had held Vanessa through her childhood fevers, that had packed her college dorm box, that had buttoned her wedding gown, hands that now washed her socks. And yet those same hands trembled, not from age, but from something awakening. She whispered to no one in particular, not even fully to herself, "They're going, and I'm staying." Again. The kettle turned off, the whistle died, and Evelyn Moore realized in the stillness of that kitchen that she hadn't disappeared. She had simply allowed herself to fade for them. And now she was thinking about light again, where it goes, and what it reveals when we stop trying to stay in the shadows. The next morning, Evelyn set the table in silence. 3 sets of cutlery, 3 folded napkins, 3 glasses of orange juice poured to the exact halfway point, one without pulp, for Lily, one with extra ice for Jordan, and one that would inevitably remain untouched because Vanessa always left for work before breakfast finished. There was a 4th setting too, but that one wasn't for anyone in particular. It was just habit. A 4th seat for herself, though she rarely sat. Vanessa came down the stairs humming, her phone tucked between her shoulder and ear. Evelyn could hear only half the conversation, but it was enough. "No, she doesn't know. I'll tell her soon. Maybe. Honestly, I don't think she'd even want to go. The walking alone would tire her out. Yeah, Lisbon's mostly cobblestone, right? Imagine the drama if she tripped. A pause, a fake laugh. It's fine. We've earned this." Evelyn finished setting the table and stepped into the living room holding the car keys. "Vanessa," she said gently, "I overheard you on the phone. About Lisbon." Vanessa froze for a moment, just a flicker, but then offered a smooth smile. "Oh, that. It's not a big deal, just a girls' trip. Me, Steph, her sister, the kids." Evelyn nodded once measured. "I saw the itinerary on Lily's iPad. It looks nice. Paris, Milan, Portugal. Sounds like quite the journey." Vanessa blinked. "You looked through Lily's tablet." "I didn't mean to snoop," Evelyn replied, her voice calm. "It just popped up. I saw the confirmation email. I noticed I wasn't listed." A pause stretched between them like a drawn bowstring. Vanessa's tone shifted, not cruel, worse, casual. "Mom, come on. You know this trip isn't really for older people. It's a fast-paced tour, lots of walking, late nights. You wouldn't enjoy it. And honestly, it'd be hard to relax knowing we'd have to accommodate everything for you. You understand, right?" She smiled as if she'd just explained something simple and reasonable. Evelyn stood still. The air in the room thinned. "So," she said slowly, "I wasn't invited because you think I'd hold everyone back." "It's not like that," Vanessa said quickly. "You're reading into this. You've always been so sensitive." Evelyn didn't argue. Her fingers curled lightly around the edge of the kitchen counter. "Sensitive?" The word rolled around in her chest like a loose stone. "I see," she said, voice soft. "When do you leave?" "In 3 weeks. But don't worry, I've already arranged for Marjorie to help with the kids if anything comes up. You can enjoy the house to yourself. Maybe use the time to rest." Rest. That word, too, sank hard and fast. Vanessa turned back to her phone. "I've got a Zoom in 10. Can we finish this later?" Evelyn nodded once. "Sure." She didn't slam the door, didn't cry, didn't beg for inclusion or explain how many years she dreamed of seeing Paris, not through a movie screen or photo album, but in the warmth of the air and the cobbled sidewalks. She didn't remind Vanessa that she was the one who taught her French phrases before her first overseas internship. She didn't say any of that. She just walked up the stairs with a stiffness in her knees that had nothing to do with arthritis. Inside her room, she moved deliberately, opened the wardrobe, reached for the shoebox high above the coats, the one labeled "for emergencies." Inside were 5 bank envelopes, a handful of savings bonds, and 2 rings wrapped in cloth, her mother's wedding band and her own. She didn't wear them anymore. Too many memories pressing into her skin. She sat down on the edge of the bed and unfolded each envelope. Counted. Not much, but enough. Enough for something. Outside, she could hear the faint sounds of Vanessa typing, the low murmur of her work call. The same voice Evelyn had once helped train to read poetry on stage in middle school, now trimmed, polished, unrecognizable. Evelyn stared down at the money. The sum of years of scraped coins, skipped coffee dates, and secondhand clothing so Vanessa could wear designer as a teenager. This money had no real purpose anymore, no tuition to pay, no emergencies left to rescue. And maybe that was the emergency. She opened the drawer and pulled out a faded notebook. It still had lesson plans from when she used to teach AP English, quotes, readings, outlines, old doodles. She flipped through the pages and then paused on one dated 20 years ago. "To Paris one day, with her. If not, then maybe alone." Evelyn traced the letters with the tip of her finger. She didn't remember writing that, but there it was, clear as breath on glass. She closed the notebook, stood up, and walked to the mirror. The woman who stared back at her looked old. That was fact. But the set of her jaw was unchanged. Her eyes, gray with age, still flickered with something unfinished. In the quiet, she whispered to her reflection, You're not disappearing, you're deciding. That evening, she didn't speak much at dinner. She served chicken parmesan, Vanessa's favorite. No one said thank you. Lily spilled water and didn't clean it. Jordan refused broccoli. Vanessa scrolled her phone during most of the meal. I'll clean up, Evelyn said when it was done. Thanks, Mom, Vanessa replied, already walking away. Evelyn watched them leave the room. Then she looked down at the empty plates and wilted napkins. She didn't clean up. Instead, she turned off the kitchen light, went upstairs, and pulled out her suitcase. The small old one. The one she hadn't used since her last teacher's conference in San Diego 10 years ago. She set it on the bed, slowly unzipped it, and took a deep breath. She didn't know exactly what she was packing for, but she knew what she was leaving behind. The phone sat cold in her hand, its black screen reflecting her lined face. Evelyn stared at it for a long time before finally typing in the number, not from memory, but from a page she had torn from an old address book buried under outdated bank statements and her late husband's veteran benefits folder. She hadn't dialed it in nearly 20 years. She pressed call. It rang twice, then a click. Harry Whitaker speaking. His voice was unmistakable. Rough around the edges, a little older but still tinged with that husky warmth she remembered from long ago, the voice of someone who always spoke like he was telling you a secret. Harry, she said quietly, it's Evelyn. A pause. Then the sound of him drawing in breath and a small, delighted laugh. Well, I'll be damned. Evelyn Moore. Or should I say Evelyn the Great, I thought you disappeared off the face of the earth. I might have, she said, voice steady, but I think I'm ready to come back. Another pause, but this time his tone softened. Tell me what happened. They spoke for over an hour. Evelyn told him everything well, almost. The parts that mattered, the decades of carrying the invisible sacrifices, the quiet dismissal, and the brutal confirmation that she was no longer seen, only used. Harry didn't interrupt, didn't give her pity. He just listened. When she finished, he cleared his throat. You know, he said, when we used to teach those kids, you were the one they remembered, not me. I took their yearbook photos. You gave them reasons to believe in their voice. And I always thought, you were born for more than laundry and guilt trips. I was a good mother, she said, as if defending herself. I didn't say you weren't, but somewhere along the way you stopped being Evelyn. You became someone's default. She didn't respond to that, not because he was wrong, but because the truth hit too close to bone. He filled the silence. I live just outside Capitol Hill now, downtown Denver. You'd love it here. Walkable. The park's got street performers again. And I know a guy who rents out studios by the month. There's even a camera co-op near Cheeseman Park that does workshops. Seniors welcome. Harry, I haven't touched a camera in decades. So what he said, neither have half the people who show up to those classes. But I've seen your eye. You had it back then, and I'd bet money you still do. Evelyn closed her eyes. For a moment, she could see it. The dusty light streaming through a downtown window, a secondhand Leica in her hand, her body unburdened by obligation. Then Vanessa's voice echoed in her head. Mom, come on! You understand, right? I don't even know where I'd begin, Evelyn whispered. Harry's answer was immediate. You begin by showing up, and you let the rest catch up to you. That night, Evelyn made herself a cup of tea but didn't drink it. She sat at the kitchen table until long after midnight, the silence so thick it seemed to grow legs and sit across from her. Her decision didn't come with thunder or weeping. It arrived like snowfall, soft, quiet, impossible to reverse once it started. At 2:07 a.m., she began to pack. Not everything, just enough. The rest she figured would sort itself out or stay behind forever. She folded clothes into the same blue suitcase she had brought to her honeymoon in 1974. Funny how the wheels still squeaked the same way. She placed the camera Harry had gifted her on her 50th birthday still pristine in its leather case on top of the clothes. Then she walked to the writing desk in the corner and took out a sheet of paper. Her handwriting was neat, deliberate. Vanessa, don't look for me. I'm safe. I'm not angry. I'm not heartbroken. But I'm also not invisible anymore. For 50 years, I've lived as the person everyone expected me to be. Now I need time to find out who I am without expectations. Take care of the children, take care of yourself, but I can't take care of this house and your silence any longer. Love, Mom. She folded the letter and placed it on the counter under the ceramic rooster Vanessa hated. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. At 4:12 a.m., she wheeled her suitcase down the hall with quiet precision, careful not to let it bump against the baseboards. She passed the kids' rooms, her eyes lingering on the closed doors. She'd braided Lily's hair just the day before, helped Jordan glue stars onto a school project. Neither had noticed the tremble in her hands. At the front door, she paused one last time, not for regret, just to remember. This was the house where she had raised a daughter, where she had danced alone in the kitchen while waiting for water to boil, where she had sobbed into a dish towel after her husband's funeral. Now it was just a place with walls. Evelyn stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness. The taxi driver didn't speak much, which she appreciated. As the city lights grew closer, she began to feel something she hadn't felt in decades: nervous anticipation. By 5:30 a.m., she stood outside a narrow 5-story brick building nestled between a bookstore and a bakery. Harry stood waiting at the door in a faded green jacket and scuffed boots, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "You really came," he said. She smiled. "I really did." He handed her the cup. "Welcome back, Evelyn." The apartment was small but clean, a second-floor walk-up with a window that looked out over a maple tree beginning to bloom. The landlord didn't ask many questions: a deposit, 2 months' rent, and a copy of her ID. That was it. She moved in that day. There was no parade, no fanfare. Just the sound of boxes being opened, the rustle of sheets being shaken out, and Evelyn standing in a space that, though unfamiliar, already felt more hers than the house she'd just left. That evening, she sat on the floor, legs crossed, staring at a blank wall. The silence was different here. Not heavy, not haunted. Empty, yes. But sometimes empty is the best place to begin again. The studio smelled like darkroom chemicals and wood polish. The chairs were mismatched. The lighting was terrible. But to Evelyn, it felt like walking into sunlight. The senior photography workshop met every Tuesday and Friday at 10 a.m., tucked inside a refurbished library near Cheeseman Park. The group was small, 6 regulars, most of them in their 60s and 70s. There was Glenn, who used to shoot weddings in the 80s and now only photographed birds. Beatrice, a widow with thick glasses and a fascination with textures. And Donna, who hadn't touched a camera since her divorce and said she was there because therapy was too damn expensive. Then there was Harry. He wasn't an instructor per se, but he knew everyone ran the co-op's equipment rotation and occasionally wandered through critiques to say things like, "You've got light leaking out of your composition, like your heart's not ready yet." It had been 48 years since Evelyn had held a camera seriously. Her hands trembled a little when Harry handed her a borrowed DSLR. "Still works the same," he said. "Just more buttons now." She took it gently, like it might bite her. "What do I even shoot?" "Whatever feels like it's still breathing," he answered. That first week, Evelyn pointed her lens at anything: brick walls, faded murals, stray dogs. She took a photo of a crumpled napkin on the sidewalk and stared at it for 20 minutes, thinking it looked more alive than she had felt in months. And people noticed. There was something about her framing her choices: the loneliness in a half-empty coffee cup, the defiance in a woman's hands gripping a walker, the stubborn joy in a child's chalk drawing half erased by rain. She didn't just capture what things looked like, she captured what they meant. By the end of the month, Harry convinced her to post her photos online. "Instagram?" she asked, horrified. "It's just a gallery with comments and chaos," he replied. "Call yourself whatever you want. The world's full of people pretending to be younger than they are. You be exactly who you are. That's your superpower." She thought for a long moment, then typed in a handle: Silvershooter70. Her first post was a photo of an old man feeding pigeons, the shadows of wings slicing across his face like memories. The caption read, "He said he fed the birds every day because they remembered him. Sometimes I wonder what remembers me." The photo got 12 likes, then 30, then 100. She posted another, a woman waiting at a bus stop, her hands clutching a bouquet of wildflowers. Caption: "No one asked who they were for. Maybe she didn't know either." That one hit 500 likes overnight. Comments poured in. "Who is this photographer?" Her words hit harder than the picture following, "I feel seen." Within 2 weeks, a local lifestyle blogger reposted her work with the headline, "Meet the 70-year-old voice of Denver's streets." Evelyn sat frozen at her tiny kitchen table, phone in hand, watching her notifications explode. Messages from strangers, emails, requests for prints. One read, "I showed my mom your photos. She cried. She said she forgot women our age could still matter." Still matter. It hit her like a punch and a hug at the same time. But it was the video that changed everything. Harry helped her record it, just a short clip, 1 minute long. Her face in soft light, the skyline behind her, the wind catching silver in her hair. "I spent most of my life in service to others," she said into the lens. "I raised a child, buried a husband, taught students to read and write. And somehow when I stopped doing all those things, the world stopped seeing me." She paused. "But I didn't disappear. I just stepped aside. Now I'm stepping forward again." She looked directly at the camera. "And I want to remind everyone out there, age isn't exile. We still have stories. We still have fire." Harry uploaded it to her page with the hashtag #SilvershooterSpeaks. The next morning, she woke up to 50,000 views, then 200,000, then 1,000,000. She was viral. The phone rang nonstop for days. Good Morning Denver, a regional podcast called Women Rewritten. A university art program asked if she'd be a guest speaker. She almost didn't respond to the email from the newspaper, the Denver Post, no less. A young journalist named Aisha had written, "I watched your video with my grandmother. We both cried. She said she used to be brave like that before arthritis and silence made her forget. I want to tell your story, not as a sensation, as a mirror, please." Evelyn agreed. Aisha arrived on a Tuesday morning, camera and notebook in hand, wearing earrings that sparkled with defiance. They met at the cafe below Evelyn's apartment where the barista now knew her order: black coffee, 1 sugar, no milk. So Aisha said recorder on you were a teacher, a mother, a wife. Then you disappeared, and now this. Evelyn smiled. I didn't disappear. I was erased. But I kept whispering to myself until the words got loud again. Why photography? Because it's proof that I see that I'm still here. Aisha nodded slowly. Did anyone in your family support this? Evelyn hesitated. No, they haven't seen this version of me. I'm not sure they'd recognize her. Would you want them to? I'm not sure they deserve to. The article went live 3 days later. The headline read, Rewriting the Frame Evelyn Moore and the Art of Coming Back. Within hours, her follower count doubled. She received a message from a woman in Vermont who had left her retirement home after watching the video. Another from a man in Alabama who said he'd picked up his trumpet again because I saw you and I remembered who I was. And then silence from Vanessa. Not a call, not a message, nothing. Evelyn didn't cry. Not this time. She just went out onto her tiny balcony, lifted her camera and took a photo of the morning light breaking across the cracked sidewalk like the world remembering its shape again. It was the hair that caught everyone's attention first. Evelyn Moore had always worn it long, tucked neatly into a soft twist, pinned with care like a schoolmarm out of time. But when she stepped into the studio of Kay Den's morning talk show Sunlight and Story, she no longer looked like the forgotten mother who made casseroles in the background of other people's lives. Her hair was short now, neatly trimmed, feathered with silver sweeping just above her ears. Her blouse was crisp white linen, her pants a deep charcoal. No pastels, no floral scarves, just confidence. She didn't try to look younger, that wasn't the point. She looked like someone who had arrived and didn't plan on leaving. The show's producers had framed the segment as the Silver Uprising, how one woman found herself after 70. There were 2 hosts, a polished man named Dax who smiled too much, and a woman named Elise herself in her early 50s, who leaned forward like she was listening with her soul. They greeted Evelyn like royalty. Ms. Moore, you've become quite the icon, Elise said as the cameras rolled. Millions have watched your video, thousands follow your work. But I want to start here. What made you walk out that door? Evelyn looked into the lens, her voice clear, unwavering. I spent 50 years waiting to be noticed for more than my usefulness, she said. I thought if I just gave enough, loved enough, stayed quiet enough, someone would say she matters. But no one ever did. A pause. So I stopped waiting. The audience clapped, but Evelyn didn't smile for applause. She smiled because it felt good to finally say it out loud with the world watching. Elise leaned in. And now you're the face of something much larger than yourself. People are calling you a movement. I'm just a woman who chose herself, Evelyn said. I think that's more radical than people realize. Somewhere across town, in an open concept office where sleek white desks met glass dividers and artificial plants lined the walls, Vanessa Moore stared at a muted TV screen above the break room coffee machine. She wasn't paying attention at first. She'd come in for a refill, scrolling her email, annoyed at a client who'd asked for a budget rewrite 5 minutes before lunch. Then something familiar flickered at the corner of her eye. She looked up, and her cup hit the floor. The coffee spread slowly across the tiles as the screen filled with her mother's face. But not the face Vanessa knew, not the tired eyes, the soft posture, the timid yes dear voice. This woman was someone else entirely. The chyron below the image read Evelyn Moore, 70 aka Silver Shooter 70. Viral photographer speaks on reinventing aging. Vanessa blinked, mouth open slightly. She grabbed the remote from the counter, turned the volume up. On screen, Evelyn was holding up one of her photographs. A man pushing a walker across a snow-dusted sidewalk, his shadow stretching long and proud behind him. I think we all leave shadows, Evelyn said softly. For a long time, I thought mine was just a blur behind someone else's light. But maybe we're allowed to be the sun sometimes too. The audience clapped again. Vanessa stepped back as if the television itself had struck her. She had to sit. This couldn't be real. She scrambled for her phone, opened Instagram, typed in the name, Silver Shooter 70. The profile came up immediately, over 400,000 followers. A bio that read 70, free. Seeing the world for the first time. Post after post, photos, captions, thousands of comments. This saved me. Your words gave me back my breath. My grandmother framed this. She says it's her heart on paper. Vanessa's hands trembled. She scrolled faster. She saw the apartment, the city streets, the self-portraits, her mother's handwriting beneath each image, personal, raw, beautiful. One post stopped her cold. A photo of a windowsill light pouring through lace curtains. Caption. This is the last place I stood before I walked away. I wasn't angry, just done. With shrinking, with waiting, with being loved like an afterthought. Vanessa stared. And for the first time, truly, she saw her mother. Not as the default cook or the built-in babysitter. Not as the faded woman who always said yes, who folded silently into the background. But as someone who had left and bloomed. A lump formed in her throat, but it wasn't guilt. Not yet. It was recognition. In all her carefully curated life, her career, her curated vacations, her Pinterest perfect dinners, Vanessa had never once thought to ask her mother what she wanted. She hadn't just taken her for granted, she'd erased her. Across town in the studio green room, Evelyn peeled off the clip-on microphone as the producers fawned over her, offering sparkling water and compliments. "You were incredible," one said. "The lines about shrinking God that's going viral again." But Evelyn barely heard them. She was staring at her phone, another 1,000 notifications, more messages, and just one from a name she hadn't seen in weeks. "Vanessa sent 11 minutes ago. I saw you. I didn't know how much I didn't know, I'm sorry." That was it. No long apology, no explanation. Just a thread thin and shaking reaching across the silence. Evelyn stared at it. She didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, she walked outside into the morning sun, adjusted the strap of the camera around her neck, and pointed her lens toward a mother holding her daughter's hand at a crosswalk light, flaring just behind them like the beginning of a reckoning. The Denver morning was bright, cloudless, sharp in that way winter days could sometimes be sunny and biting all at once. Vanessa clutched the steering wheel of her Lexus, double-parked outside the address she'd scribbled down just hours earlier, staring up at the unassuming brick building that stood quietly between a Pilates studio and a bicycle repair shop. She had found it on her third Google Dive that week. The website for the photography co-op had a staff page. There she was, Evelyn Moore, contributor, visual memoirs. Below that, a link to her latest gallery and a short paragraph written in first person. "I thought I was a backdrop. Turns out I'm a frame." Vanessa had reread that sentence 6 times. She had considered calling, emailing, something, but it all felt small, like trying to send a message in a bottle across a storm. So here she was in a pencil skirt and kitten heels hair pulled tight into a bun, like she had somewhere to be more important than here, which for the first time in a long time was not true. She stepped out and crossed the sidewalk slowly, heels tapping too loudly against the pavement, heart thudding even louder in her chest. There were flyers on the window, exhibit dates, a poster with Evelyn's face, eyes half-shadowed, titled, "Unfolding the Woman Rewrites Herself." Vanessa hesitated, then pushed the door open. A young man behind a small wooden desk looked up, blinking beneath thick glasses. He wore a faded hoodie and had a pencil tucked behind his ear. "Hi," Vanessa said, too formal. "I'm here to see Evelyn Moore." He looked confused, then apologetic. "I'm sorry, but she's in studio and we don't take unscheduled visitors. You can send a message or book through our online calendar." "She's my mother." That gave him pause. He stared at her, not with recognition, but with the vague suspicion of someone who'd read about a story, but didn't realize he was now in the sequel. "She asked us not to disturb her during shoots," he said carefully, "and specifically not to allow anyone without appointments, even if they're family." Vanessa felt her breath catch. Not to be dramatic, but it was like being locked out of her own childhood home. Only this time the locks had changed, and someone else held the key with purpose. "I just need 2 minutes," she said. "Please. Tell her Vanessa is here." The man hesitated again, then sighed. "I'll see what I can do." He disappeared into the back. Vanessa stood, arms crossed tightly, trying to will herself into composure. She could hear faint laughter down the hall, a camera click, the sound of someone describing aperture settings. The man returned 2 minutes later, holding a small envelope. His face was unreadable. "She asked me to give you this." Vanessa took the envelope, opened it with fingers that now trembled despite her efforts. Inside was a single piece of paper, thick cream stock. Her mother's handwriting flowed across it, clear and even. "I didn't disappear. I simply stepped out of the shadow I was never meant to die in. You're not ready to see me yet, and I'm not ready to be seen by who you used to be." "Mom?" Vanessa folded the paper slowly, her lips parted but said nothing. Back outside, she sat in her car for a full 15 minutes without starting the engine. She didn't cry. She just stared at the brick wall in front of her and felt for the first time what her mother must have felt standing in the doorway of their old kitchen, present but not invited. That night, she Googled Evelyn again. There were new headlines now, not just local ones. USA Today, the silver lens that's changing how we see aging. Women's Weekly, from invisible to unstoppable, meet Evelyn Moore. And in the comments, something that made Vanessa's stomach knot. People had found out about her. Not just that Evelyn had a daughter, but that the daughter had left her mother behind. Imagine abandoning a woman like this. Where was her family when she needed them? She's better off without them. It felt like being peeled open. Her own LinkedIn profile had a sudden spike in views. An anonymous email came through her company contact form. "Do you regret erasing your mother or just getting caught?" Vanessa's hand shook as she deleted it. But the damage was done. She had lived her life in carefully constructed performance, career, woman, mother, wife, daughter. Efficient, practical, in control. Now strangers with usernames like 8 Quiet Fury and I Aging is Powerful were holding up her failure like a mirror. And the worst part, they weren't wrong. For the next week, Vanessa found herself spiraling not publicly but quietly, canceling meetings, snapping at her kids, staring at her mother's social media posts like they were sacred texts she wasn't allowed to comment on. She even typed out a response to one photo, a self-portrait Evelyn had taken in the mirror of a train car captioned, "We spend so long traveling to where others expect us to arrive, then one day you buy your own ticket." Vanessa's comment sat in the draft box for 30 minutes. "I see you now. I'm sorry for not seeing you then." But she never hit post. Instead, she closed her phone and whispered into the empty kitchen, "Why didn't you tell me you were this brave?" The silence, once her safety net, now echoed like indictment. And still Evelyn remained silent. Not cruel, not vindictive, just absent. And Vanessa began to realize absence when chosen holds more weight than presence when expected. The attic smelled of cedar and regret. Vanessa stood on the narrow pull-down ladder, a flashlight gripped in one hand, the other steadying herself as she took the final step into the low-ceilinged crawl space above her garage. It was late past midnight, the kids were asleep, her husband had stopped asking questions. The silence between them had become a second language. She hadn't come up here in years. Maybe not since they moved in. The insulation was patchy, the air stale, but there was one box she'd remembered from childhood, green duct taped at the corners marked winter clothes, Mom. She pulled it towards her. Not winter coats, photographs, hundreds of them. Loose prints rolls of undeveloped negatives, old black and white 4x6 with dates scrawled on the back in careful cursive, Paris 1973, Santa Fe 1981, Vanessa 5 months. Her breath caught in her throat. She pulled out a binder, thick, leather-bound, wrapped with twine. Inside sleeves of contact sheets, Polaroids, magazine clippings. One page was entirely dedicated to a letter in French. She unfolded it. At the top was a letterhead, École Nationale Supérieure de la Photographie Arles, a full-ride scholarship. The date was August 1982. Vanessa's name wasn't mentioned anywhere. She kept reading. The letter celebrated Evelyn's raw talent, called her une visionnaire de la lumière, a visionary of light. The letter was signed, stamped, final, and folded beneath it another page. A copy of the letter Evelyn had written in return, never sent. Typed but never mailed. "With deepest gratitude, I must decline the scholarship. My daughter is ill, and my family requires my full presence. I know this decision may seem irrational, even foolish, but sometimes the camera must be set down to hold a different kind of frame, one made not of viewfinders but of arms. Thank you for believing in me even when I can't choose me." Vanessa sat down hard on the floor. She could barely feel her legs. She had always thought of her mother's past as vague schoolteacher, homemaker, widow. But this was a life interrupted, a dream buried beneath casseroles and carpools and parent-teacher conferences. She sifted deeper through the box. There were photographs she'd never seen. Her mother standing in a small alley in Montmartre, a scarf wrapped around her hair, camera slung over her shoulder, smile wide and unafraid. Another in black and white of a girl beside a fountain, arms flung wide, sunlight catching her cheekbones like prophecy. She recognized the woman, but also didn't. This wasn't the version she grew up with. This was before the sacrifice, before her father's illness, before the mortgage, before the resignation. Vanessa flipped through more prints. One in particular stopped her. A photo of herself, age 5, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a bowl of cereal, sunlight pouring over her hair like a halo. It was candid, perfectly framed, raw, and intimate. And it had been taken with a mother's eye but an artist's soul. Vanessa turned it over. Scribbled in pencil were the words, "Light in small moments, even if the gallery is a kitchen floor." She pressed the photo to her chest as if doing so could rewind the clock. That was the moment it hit her, not in a poetic way, not in a sudden cinematic gasp, but in the ache that came from memory finally arriving too late. She hadn't just overlooked her mother, she had erased her. All her life, Evelyn had been painted in brushstrokes of service. A helper, a caregiver, the background. But the truth was, her mother had once been brilliant. No, she was brilliant. The world was just finally seeing it. And Vanessa hadn't. Downstairs, she pulled the bin with more photos to the living room, sifting through them like a historian trying to reconstruct a civilization that had been buried by routine. There was a clipping from a Denver college newsletter. Evelyn had won a local award for a photo series on single mothers in the 70s. A faded Polaroid of a photo exhibit her mother in a handmade blue dress standing in front of a gallery wall looking nervous but proud. And in a journal tucked beneath it, all pages filled with entries like, "Vanessa has strep, missed 3 days of school. Threw out the France papers today. Not sad, just hollow. Maybe I can still do portraits someday." Vanessa couldn't breathe. These weren't just photographs. They were receipts of sacrifice, of love transmuted into silence, of a woman who had consistently chosen others over herself until there was nothing left but remnants in a box. And she, the daughter in the center of it all, had never asked once. Never once said, "What did you want for yourself, Mom?" Because the assumption had always been mothers didn't want things. They fulfilled things. They covered gaps. They didn't dream. they maintained. She sat on the couch until dawn, photos surrounding her like evidence at the scene of an emotional crime. Her crime? She wanted to scream, to run to her mother and beg for forgiveness, but part of her knew this wasn't about being forgiven. It was about finally seeing her, about unlearning the entitlement to a woman's silence simply because she'd always offered it. Vanessa picked up one of the negatives, held it to the lamp. It was an image of a woman's shadow stretching across an empty street. Her mother's note came echoing back. I didn't disappear. I simply stepped out of the shadow I was never meant to die in. Vanessa finally understood. The shadow was her. The letter arrived on handmade paper, the kind you only use when words feel too heavy to type. Evelyn unfolded it slowly in her apartment kitchen, still in her robe, a cup of Earl Grey forgotten beside her. The handwriting was unmistakable, clean, deliberate, almost painfully neat. Mom, I know I don't deserve your time, but I'm asking anyway. I've been going through your photos, your past. It's beautiful. It's breathtaking. And it's breaking me. I didn't know the woman behind the apron. I want to now. If you can find it in your heart to meet me even just once. I'll be at Café Loire this Saturday, 10 a.m. I'll be waiting even if you don't come. Vanessa. Evelyn sat with the letter for a full hour before she folded it neatly and slipped it into her camera bag. She didn't write back, but that Saturday she arrived at the cafe at 9:45. Vanessa was already there, seated by the window, a mug of untouched coffee between her hands. She looked older than Evelyn remembered, not in the face, but in the posture, in the way she flinched every time the door opened. When she saw her mother, she stood quickly, awkwardly. Her eyes were already wet. Hi, Mom. Evelyn didn't hug her. She sat. There was silence. Thick. Not unfamiliar, but this time it wasn't passive. It was charged. Vanessa tried first. I didn't know where to start. Evelyn met her gaze, calm but unreadable. Then maybe start where you last ended. Vanessa blinked. I'm sorry. For what? For not seeing you, for making you feel like you didn't matter. Evelyn's fingers tightened slightly around the cup of tea she had just ordered. You didn't make me feel that way, Vanessa, she said evenly. You just confirmed it. Vanessa flinched like she'd been slapped. I didn't mean to. No, Evelyn said you just didn't mean not to. Silence again. The cafe was buzzing with weekend life, clinking plates, laughter, a child crying near the pastry case. But around them, time felt still. I want you to come back, Vanessa finally said softly. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Back to what? To the house, to us, to me and the kids. Evelyn smiled, but it wasn't kind. It wasn't cruel either. It was tired. Did you miss me, Vanessa? Or did you miss the convenience of me? Vanessa opened her mouth. Because I wasn't company in that house, Evelyn continued. I was function. I was babysitter, housekeeper, errand runner. You left me behind for Paris because you didn't want your friends to think you brought your nanny. That's not true, Evelyn interrupted. Tell me, when was the last time you asked me how I was? What I dreamed of? What I lost? Vanessa's face crumpled. You were always so capable, she whispered. Evelyn's voice cracked, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Being capable isn't the same as being invulnerable. Vanessa reached across the table. Her fingers brushed Evelyn's knuckles. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. You don't, Evelyn said, but that's not the point. Vanessa's hand froze mid-motion. Evelyn leaned in slightly. This isn't about punishing you, it's about freeing me. For 70 years, I lived for other people's needs, and when I finally chose myself, the world said I was brave. But all I did was stop asking for permission. Vanessa looked up, tears sliding down her cheek. I miss you. You miss the version of me that didn't ask anything of you, Evelyn said. That woman doesn't exist anymore. They sat like that, a chasm of time and truth between them. Finally, Evelyn's voice softened. I never stopped loving you, Vanessa, but I don't owe you my silence anymore. A pause. Or my shadow. Vanessa wiped her eyes with the cuff of her sweater. What do I do now? Evelyn stood. You figure out who your mother really is. Not the one who packed your lunches, but the one who gave up Paris so you could recover from bronchitis. The one who took photos while you slept and cried when no one was watching. She pulled a small envelope from her coat and placed it on the table. There's an exhibit next month, she said. You'll find the invitation in there. Vanessa looked up. You want me to come? Evelyn gave a small nod. I want you to decide for yourself whether you see me now. And with that, she walked out. No dramatic pause, no glance over the shoulder. Just the soft click of the cafe door swinging shut. Vanessa sat there for a long time, the envelope untouched. But this time she would open it, eventually, when she was ready to stop loving only the version of her mother that served her, and start loving the woman who finally served herself. It started with a letter. A bland, impersonal envelope slid through Evelyn's mailbox, addressed in block print E. Moore, important notice regarding your account. She opened it with the same absent-mindedness she gave to water bills and neighborhood flyers. But the moment her eyes skimmed the contents, her body tensed. Final notice, it read, delinquent balance 12,648.18, Honda Financial Services. She didn't own a Honda. She didn't own any car. Her hands trembled as she read the next lines. A 2022 Honda CR-V, co-signer Evelyn Moore, primary owner Vanessa Moore Hartley. The breath left her lungs. She stared at the page, waiting for sense to form some alternative explanation, some administrative mix-up. But the VIN number was specific. The address matched Vanessa's suburban home. The first payment had been processed 10 months ago, without her knowledge, without her consent. Her stomach sank deeper when an hour later she logged into her online credit profile, a service she'd begun using at Harry's insistence just in case. A second account popped up. Another loan. Private Education Fund, Boulder Community College. Co-signer Evelyn Moore. Amount borrowed $1,800. Beneficiary Emma Hartley. Her granddaughter. Evelyn sat frozen in her apartment for nearly 3 hours, unable to cry, unable to move. Just rereading the numbers. The betrayal wasn't in the debt. It was in the assumption that she wouldn't notice, that she wouldn't matter enough to need to be asked, that her name was expendable. And worse, useful. She didn't call Vanessa. Not this time. She opened her email instead. Typed slowly. Vanessa, I received notice today that I'm a co-signer on 2 accounts. I never approved your car loan and Emma's tuition fund. I don't recall ever giving consent. I'd like to believe this was a mistake. Please clarify before I escalate this. Mom. The response came 2 days later. Short, frantic. Mom, I'm so sorry. I meant to tell you. It was just easier this way with the paperwork. I knew you'd say yes, and it was for Emma and the family. Please don't be mad. I'll fix it. Please don't do anything yet. I'll explain everything. Evelyn closed the email. She didn't reply. Instead, she forwarded it to her attorney. Not a flashy one. Not the kind with marble floors and assistants in tailored suits. Just Marla Reyes, a retired civil litigator who ran a legal clinic out of an old bookstore turned office 2 blocks from Evelyn's apartment. Marla read everything in silence, then looked up, eyebrows drawn. This is identity misuse. If you wanted to pursue this, we'd have a solid case. Evelyn nodded slowly. Would she go to jail? Unlikely. First offense. But she could face fines, credit consequences, maybe even probation, depending on how deep it goes. Evelyn stared out the window. Would it make her understand? Marla didn't answer. She didn't have to. That night, Evelyn sat in her studio with the lights dimmed, old jazz crackling from a turntable. She looked at a photo she'd taken weeks earlier, Vanessa unknowing captured through the glass of that cafe. Her daughter's expression a mix of sorrow and defense. She picked up her phone, deleted Vanessa's number from favorites, then turned to her desk and began writing a letter not to Vanessa but to herself. You don't owe forgiveness to people who see your worth only after they've spent it. Her finger hovered over her email app. The cursor blinked over the unsent draft addressed to Marla. One button would trigger proceedings, forms, depositions, legal fire. The other option, silence, and the slow rot of enabling. That weekend, she attended a local photography meetup. Someone brought up her rising fame, joked about how even your past is marketable now. Evelyn smiled politely, but her heart was elsewhere. Sunday morning, her doorbell rang. Vanessa stood there, no makeup, no children in tow, just a folder in her hand. I paid off the car, she said quietly, and I've started the paperwork to refinance the tuition loan under just my name. I'll take the hit. Evelyn didn't respond. I didn't come to beg, Vanessa added. I just wanted you to know. I know I crossed a line, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want to own what I did. Evelyn stepped aside, let her daughter in, not into her home, but into the silence that followed. And when the door closed behind her, Evelyn said only this. I'm not angry because you borrowed money. I'm angry because you borrowed me. Vanessa's face crumpled. I thought you were strong enough to handle it, she whispered. I was, Evelyn said. That's the problem. Then she handed her the photo of Vanessa at the cafe. Candid, honest, broken. I forgive you, Evelyn said, but you're going to have to earn back the right to be forgiven. The light in Evelyn's studio that morning was golden and soft, pouring through the sheer curtains like a quiet hymn. It danced across the old hardwood floor and lit up the corners of her photo wall, the one she called her sanctuary. On it hung pieces of her life, not in chronological order, but in emotional sequence, sorrow beside rebirth, silence beside song. She sat in her favorite chair, a low-slung recliner her late husband had once surprised her with, after a grueling parent-teacher conference week, and held a faded photograph between her hands. It was of him, Arthur Moore, taken the summer before his cancer diagnosis. He stood on a cliff edge in Red Rock's arms, outstretched like he was daring the wind to push him. She had captured it in a split second with her old Minolta. The frame was imperfect, slightly tilted, a streak of sun on the lens, but it had always been her favorite, because in it he looked free. Arthur had been the first person in Evelyn's life who ever told her she didn't have to earn love, who never saw her as useful, but as whole. He wasn't flawless. He was often late, had a soft spot for bad jazz, and believed every flat tire could be fixed with duct tape. But he had a way of making her feel seen, especially when she didn't speak. And most of all, Arthur had believed in forgiveness not as surrender, but as liberation. She remembered it like it was yesterday. It was a summer evening. Vanessa had been 13, furious over some teenage betrayal, friends gossiping, secrets exposed. Evelyn had fumed on her daughter's behalf, offering every maternal fury she could muster. But Arthur had said something then while washing dishes that stuck with her forever. Forgiveness isn't weakness, Evie. It's a decision to stop being tethered to what hurt you. He wiped his hands, handed her a dish towel, and added, "Doesn't mean you let them back in. It just means you let you out." Now Evelyn ran her thumb along the edge of that photograph and whispered, "I remember Art." She didn't press charges. The paperwork from the attorney stayed in her desk drawer unsigned. The account flags were cleared after Vanessa refinanced and repaid most of the debt. The apologies, repeated, handwritten, hesitant, had come in waves, each softer than the last. But Evelyn never responded. Not until this morning. She wrote a single letter, folded it with care, slipped it into an envelope, and left it at the front desk of Vanessa's office building downtown. "Vanessa, I won't pursue legal action. Not because I've forgotten, not because what you did doesn't carry weight, but because I choose not to let your choices define my future. I forgive you, but I won't return to being your emergency plan, your invisible lifeline. My financial support ends here. I am not your backup system. You'll have to stand on your own now, just like I had to." Mom. Later that day, Evelyn met with Harry at their usual cafe. He brought her a new lens cap for her Canon, and she handed him a fresh black and white print she'd developed the night before. It was of her hands, wrinkled, elegant, holding the photograph of Arthur against her chest. He studied the photo. "You look like you're carrying peace," he said. She nodded. "It took me 70 years, Harry, but I think I finally unpacked the guilt." They laughed gently. He offered her another croissant, which she declined with a smirk. And later that night, when the city lights flickered on and the air outside turned crisp, Evelyn recorded a short video for her followers, no filters, no music, just her voice, her truth. "People always ask what forgiveness looks like. I used to think it was a quiet nod, a whispered, 'It's okay.' But it's not. Forgiveness is a line drawn in chalk, not cement. It's a door that opens inward, not backward. I forgave my daughter this week. But I'm not going back to where I stopped existing. I've worked too hard to remember who I am. So here's what I know now. You can love someone and still choose yourself. You can let go without returning. And you can forgive without forgetting." By morning, the video had gone viral again. But Evelyn didn't check the numbers. She didn't refresh the comments. She took her camera, slung it over her shoulder, and walked out into the city, ready to capture the world not as someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's helper, but as Evelyn Moore, a woman who remembered, a woman who released, a woman who finally belonged to herself. The day Evelyn's photography exhibit opened, the city felt unusually alive. Not just because of the soft spring wind rustling through the budding trees or the sunlight that spilled like champagne across the pavement, but because people were lining up around the block to see the work of a 70-year-old woman they now knew as something more than a mother, more than a shadow. She arrived an hour early, as she always did when it mattered. The gallery smelled of fresh paint and eucalyptus candles. Volunteers rushed to finish final touches. Each frame hung level labeled. Each photograph carried its own weight, its own confession. But the real story was in the collective, the journey of a woman who refused to disappear. At the center of the space, beneath a spotlight softened to a golden hue, hung the opening piece, the shadow that stepped into light. A self-portrait. Evelyn standing in a doorway, one foot still in shadow, the other bathed in morning light. Her expression not triumphant, but steady, unapologetic. People began filing in. Some she recognized, her students from decades ago, neighbors from her old cul-de-sac, Harry in his signature corduroy jacket holding 2 paper cups of chai. Others were strangers. One woman about Evelyn's age with silver braids and a cane that clicked with each step paused in front of the final series titled "What I Left Behind." She stared at a photo of Evelyn's empty rocking chair by a cold hearth, then turned, her voice trembling. "You told our story," she said. "All of us who stayed quiet too long." Evelyn didn't know what to say, so she just reached out and held the woman's hand. By the end of the evening, media outlets had arrived. One reporter from the Denver Post described the exhibit as a resurrection in frames. Another called her the accidental matriarch of a revolution no one saw coming. But Evelyn didn't care about headlines. She watched the faces, the slow gasps, the tears people tried to hide when they saw their own mothers in her images, or worse, themselves. Afterward, as guests filtered out and lights dimmed, a young woman approached her. She was maybe 30, with exhaustion behind her eyes. "My mom sent me your video last month," she said. "She hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. We talked yesterday." Evelyn smiled. Not every scar heals with reunion, but sometimes it begins there. A week later, an email arrived from a nonprofit called Renewed Grace. They were launching a national campaign titled The Elder Reclamation Project, aimed at redefining aging as transformation rather than decline. They wanted Evelyn to be the face of the movement. The first line of the proposal read, "We believe you're not just a survivor of emotional abandonment. You are proof that reinvention has no expiration date." Evelyn laughed when she read it, then cried, because it was true. The contract didn't offer fame or riches, just speaking engagements, mentorship circles, and a feature in a documentary series about second lives. She accepted, and soon her calendar was filled with events. Not the glamorous kind, not Hollywood red carpets or late-night interviews, but church basements in Indiana, retirement homes in Albuquerque, women's shelters in Kansas City. Everywhere she went, women came up to her not to ask how she became famous, but how she escaped being forgotten. At one Q&A session, a woman stood up and asked, "Do you ever wish you'd done it sooner?" Evelyn thought about that. "No," she said gently, "because I needed every year of silence to recognize the sound of my own voice when it finally returned." One photo from her exhibit had been selected to travel with her, a piece titled "First Morning Alone." It showed her reflection in a bakery window, a loaf of sourdough under one arm, sunlight on her cheek, no ring on her finger. Not widowhood, not abandonment, but a deliberate solitude. It became the campaign's signature image. Eventually, the Smithsonian reached out for rights to archive select pieces from her collection under a new program titled Aging and Identity in Modern America. Her photo would hang next to civil rights artifacts, wartime diaries, and cultural touchstones. Evelyn declined the first invitation, then reconsidered. She called Harry. "Do you think it's too much?" He chuckled. "Evie, too much was the 60 years you spent not being celebrated." She agreed to a smaller showing a room within the exhibit titled Legacy Through Lens. Her part titled simply, "I Was Always Here." And by the time summer rolled around, she had 300,000 followers on her social media. Not for filters, not for dances, but for daily reflections written in the voice of someone who knew what it was to give up everything and then take it back. She never shamed her daughter publicly. She never named her family as villains. But she made it clear the role of martyr was retired. She'd rewritten the script. One follower commented, "You didn't just walk out of the shadows, Evelyn. You made a home in the light and left the door open for the rest of us." And that was all she'd ever wanted. Not revenge, not attention, just to be seen and to make seeing yourself feel less terrifying for others. She arrived unnoticed, just as the late afternoon sun dipped below the edge of the gallery windows. Emma stood by herself, hoodie drawn, trying not to be seen by the volunteers handing out programs. 17, now taller than Evelyn remembered, but still carrying that same quiet intensity in her eyes. No one recognized her, and that was just how she wanted it. The photograph stopped her cold. It wasn't dramatic, no sweeping landscapes, no intense shadows, just Evelyn standing in the middle of a snow-covered park, a red knit scarf wrapped around her neck, her cheeks pink with cold. She was smiling, not a performative smile, not the kind you give to someone asking you to look this way. It was softer inward, like she'd remembered a private joke, like the camera had captured a flicker of peace. The caption below read, "Day one of knowing I was enough." Emma stared at it for a long time. Something in her chest tightened, not with guilt exactly, and not quite sadness, but something messier. She had watched everything unfold these past months. The sudden absence of her grandmother, the way her mother Vanessa had broken down the first time Evelyn's face appeared on TV, the silence around the dinner table, the arguments behind closed doors. But no one had asked Emma what she thought. No one had wondered how she felt knowing her grandmother was out there somewhere becoming someone else, someone powerful. Tears welled in her eyes. She wiped them away quickly. Then she slipped out unnoticed again and texted the only number she had saved from Evelyn, an old, mostly unused number labeled Grandma 1. She typed, deleted, retyped. Then finally sent, "I saw your photo today, the snow one, can we talk?" No reply came for an hour. Then, "Meet me at the cafe on 6th and Broadway, the one with the green door. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Evelyn was already seated when Emma arrived, a steaming cup of tea in her hands and a black leather-bound photo journal resting on the table beside her. "Hot chocolate's on its way," Evelyn said without looking up. Emma slid into the chair across from her. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was weighty, like both knew too much had happened to pretend they were picking up where they left off. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Emma said, "I didn't think you'd respond." Evelyn looked at her gently. "Why not?" Emma hesitated. "Because I didn't stand up for you. Because I knew about the loans. About what Mom did with your name." Evelyn's hands folded calmly around her cup. "You were a child, Emma. Still are. That wasn't your burden to carry." "But I heard it all," Emma whispered, "and I didn't say anything. I guess I was scared." "That makes two of us," Evelyn said with a quiet smile. They both laughed, a short, surprised kind of laugh. Then Evelyn opened the photo journal. Inside were pictures Emma had never seen. Her grandmother in her 20s sitting barefoot on a rooftop in Paris. Evelyn behind the camera at a protest in D.C. Evelyn at 31, pregnant, paint on her jeans, standing beside a man Emma only recognized from the few faded frames in their house. "Grandpa?" she asked, tapping the photo. Evelyn nodded. "You guys looked reckless." "Oh, we were," Evelyn said. "But we loved hard. We believed the world would change if we just took enough pictures of it." Emma smiled. Then do you miss him? Every day. They sipped their drinks in silence for a while, then Emma leaned forward. Can I ask something kind of unfair? Evelyn tilted her head. Do you ever regret leaving us? Evelyn didn't answer right away. She placed her hands flat on the table, not tense, not defensive. I didn't leave you, she said slowly. I left the version of myself that was invisible to you. That's not the same thing. Emma blinked, taking it in. I missed you, she said finally. I missed you too, Evelyn replied. But I had to stop disappearing so someone else could stay comfortable. I had to stop teaching everyone that my silence meant I was fine. Emma looked down, tracing the rim of her mug. Do you think it's too late for Mom to see that? Evelyn looked out the cafe window where two women around her age were walking hand in hand past the bookstore. Her voice softened. Sometimes people can only meet you in the places they're willing to go. I left the door open. Whether she walks through it is up to her. Emma nodded. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a poem, handwritten, ink smudged at the corners. I wrote this after I saw the exhibit, she said. It's about shadows and light. Evelyn took it carefully. She didn't read it right away. She just smiled. Thank you, she said. That means everything. Outside, the wind picked up slightly. A few early blossoms danced across the sidewalk like confetti. Life in motion. Before they left the cafe, Emma asked one last question. Are you still sad? Evelyn took a long breath. Yes, she said. Sadness doesn't vanish just because you choose freedom. But it changes shape. Emma furrowed her brow. What shape is it now? Evelyn smiled. Not with her lips this time, but with her whole face. It's shaped like knowing who I am. And with that, she slipped her arm around her granddaughter's shoulders. As they walked into the early dusk, two women, two generations no longer speaking across a void, but in rhythm with one another. The early hours of a Sunday morning were always Evelyn's favorite, long before the world began asking things of her, before the phones buzzed, and before her name appeared in headlines or hashtags. This morning, the sun filtered in gently through the blind stripes of gold flickering across her kitchen table. The only sound in the apartment was the slow tick of the clock and the scratch of pen to paper. She was writing. Not an email, not a post, not a caption. A letter. Her handwriting still as elegant and deliberate as the first-grade spelling papers she used to mark in red ink curved over the thick, cream-colored paper with the weight of something final, something necessary. At the top, she simply wrote, Vanessa. She paused, inhaled deeply, and began again. I've tried many versions of this letter in my head. Some started with anger, others with hurt. But today I'm writing from stillness, from clarity. I need you to understand something, even if it's taken this long for me to find the words. I didn't leave to punish you. I left because staying meant losing the last pieces of myself I hadn't already handed over. Being your mother was never a burden, but being forgotten in your presence was. She paused again, letting the truth hang on the page. Outside, a pair of doves cooed from the fire escape. Evelyn sipped her tea, then continued. I watched you grow into a woman, a mother, and for a long time I believed that love meant being useful. I folded myself into corners, softened my voice, made myself small so you could feel big. I called it sacrifice. But sacrifice without recognition becomes servitude. And I won't live that way anymore. The words didn't burn, they didn't sting. They felt like stepping barefoot into sand after a long, cold winter. Honest, quiet, freeing. I forgive you for what you did with my name, for the debt, for the silence. But forgiveness is not permission to repeat it. The door to my heart isn't locked, but you will need to knock with new hands, with humility, with the understanding that love isn't control. Love isn't convenience. Love isn't what can she still do for me. Love is seeing me even when I'm not serving you. She folded the paper, slid it into an envelope. But there was one more thing. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a second envelope, larger, sealed with a deep red wax. It was a copy of her new will, one she had drafted a few weeks prior with the help of her lawyer, Sophia. It was clean, firm, and fair. Everything she owned, her condo, her photography rights, the modest trust she had built, would be divided between her two grandchildren. With one condition. They had to find her. Not online, not through Instagram reels or secondhand stories, but in person. They had to come and sit with her, ask her about her life, hear her truths with their own ears. They had to choose to see her not as a myth or martyr, but as Evelyn Moore, a woman of complexity, of triumph, of failure and flight. Only then would the inheritance be released. No shortcuts, no intermediaries. And Vanessa, she would receive nothing material, but she would receive something else, something Evelyn believed was more powerful than money. A chance. The letter closed with this. If you can learn to love without holding, without taking, without needing to silence the other person to feel safe, then maybe one day we'll have a new kind of beginning. Until then, I wish you peace, just not at the expense of someone else's. Mom. She signed it, sealed it, addressed it by hand. Then with deliberate calm, she walked to the postbox on the corner. She slid both envelopes in one after the other and didn't look back. Later that afternoon, Evelyn wandered through her favorite bookstore and picked up a title from the memoir section, Women Who Walked Away. The cover showed a woman standing at the edge of a dock, her face turned to the sea. She smiled, not because it was her story, but because she finally understood it. That evening, she met with Harry and a few friends from the Senior Photography Collective for dinner. They talked about lighting tricks about an upcoming exhibit about the local newspaper's feature titled The Woman Who Wrote Her Own Ending. Harry raised a glass to her. To women who step forward, he said. She clinked her glass in return. To women who no longer wait to be chosen. Back in her apartment that night, Evelyn stood at her window watching the glow of the city stretch out like a map of possibilities. She thought of Vanessa, of what might happen when the letter arrived. Would she cry? Would she curse? Would she crumble? Or would she change? Evelyn didn't know. And for the first time, she realized she didn't need to, because her freedom wasn't waiting for Vanessa's apology. It was already here, in every choice she'd made, in every boundary she'd drawn, in every frame she'd captured that whispered, "I am still becoming." And as she turned off the lights, climbed into bed, and pulled the covers up to her chest, Evelyn Moore, 70 years old, former Shadow Current Storm, slept not as someone escaping the past, but as a woman who had finally arrived in her future. The hill wasn't particularly tall. It didn't offer sweeping views of the city skyline or dramatic cliffs against a crashing ocean, but it was hers. Evelyn stood at the top just as the sun began to slip below the horizon, casting a warm, honey-colored hue over the tall grass swaying around her knees. The wind was light, just enough to pull gently at her scarf and whisper past her earlobes like an old lullaby. She held her camera to her eye, framing the scene not with precision but with purpose. Through the lens, the layered shades of twilight, a lone tree leaning eastward like an old dancer bowing at curtain call, the emptiness of space that somehow felt full. Click! That would be the final image in her series, not a portrait of a person, not a crowd or a headline moment, just the silence, just the choice to stand somewhere new, alone but not lonely, content in the truth of her own presence. The photo would eventually hang in the center of her last exhibition under the simple title, Alone, Not Lonely. No quotation marks, no explanation. It would be viewed by thousands, some who came out of curiosity, others because they had lived some version of Evelyn's story in their own silent ways. It would spark conversations, inspire essays, and be printed in textbooks one day under the header, Women Who Chose Themselves. But in that moment, before any of that, Evelyn simply turned off the camera, slid it gently into its case, and sat down on the grass. The sun was almost gone now. The last threads of gold were spilling like secrets across the landscape. She closed her eyes, and her voice began to narrate the ending, not with triumph, not with vengeance, but with resolution, with truth. I didn't disappear. I just stopped being the shadow in a story I didn't write. I stopped giving my silence as a gift to people who mistook it for consent. I stopped making myself small so others could stretch out comfortably in my absence. I didn't leave out of hate. I left out of love. Love for the woman I still was underneath the apron, underneath the grocery lists and forgotten birthdays. Love for the girl who once dreamed of Paris and pictures and being seen. I don't hate them, but I chose to love myself first. The screen fades to black and the sound of soft wind continues a beat longer. Not mournful, just still, just real. Cut to a still image, the photo Evelyn took on that hill. She's not in it. She didn't need to be. The light, the angle, the softness, it all speaks for her. Underneath it, the words, dedicated to everyone who thought it was too late to begin. Fade to white. Then in handwritten font, Evelyn Moore, 1954, still writing the rest. And finally, one last voiceover just above a whisper. Freedom doesn't always look like running away. Sometimes it looks like standing still, breathing deep, and knowing you're finally whole. The credits begin to roll to the sound of a solo piano piece, a melody equal parts reflective and uplifting. A series of behind-the-scenes photos of Evelyn's life quietly play alongside snapshots of her with the photography class coffee dates with Emma, her hand grasping Harry's for a quick second of laughter. No drama, no grand finale, just the steady unfolding of a woman becoming herself again. And when the screen finally fades to black, nothing more is said. It doesn't need to be. She didn't vanish. She arrived.